I really enjoy the conversations and learning and getting demos. The hard part is going and integrating and implementing it, right? That's the blood, sweat, and tears that really teaches you how the software works. And that's why we don't have dozens of customers. We have a handful of customers who they rely on us to deploy this technology and support it and own it, and we're an extension of their team.
Did you know that 91% of phishing attacks are conducted via email? Freight brokers are particularly at risk as email is the primary, really only option to collect carrier invoices, until now. EPay Manager, powered by OTR Solutions, is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. The key to EPay's invoicing workflow is that the invoice is proactively triggered by the broker's TMS and is only created once the carrier reviews the details, which catches invoice disputes early on. This means that you can increase your invoice processing by up to 300 to 500% and reduce billing inaccuracies by 99%. Learn more about EPay by visiting epaymanager.com or text EPayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage.
Today's podcast is also brought to you by TextLocate. TextLocate makes it easy for brokers to communicate directly with drivers via SMS-based text messaging, no app to download without having to use personal communication devices. Features like two-way text chat, one-time location updates, and image capture, think BOLs and PODs, all inside a simple dashboard, give brokers the quick updates they need to make better decisions about freight. Instead of wasting time calling drivers, brokers simply automate the process through TextLocate and save hours at very little cost investment. Go to textlocate.com to learn more.
Struggling to find and retain qualified staff while keeping costs in check? In today's competitive logistics landscape, this challenge can make or break your bottom line. Ameripol offers a solution that helps reduce staffing costs by over 50% without sacrificing quality. Born out of logistics, they understand transportation industry demands. They provide talented EU-based professionals who seamlessly integrate with your team, allowing you to scale operations efficiently. Don't let staffing challenges hinder growth. Optimize your workforce and boost profitability with Ameripol. Visit transport.ameripolstaffing.com to discover how Ameripol can help your business operate more efficiently. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I did want to take a second to tell you a little bit about our new sponsor, Levity.ai. In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit Levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Welcome back to another episode of the FreightCaviar Podcast. Today, we are also back in Chicago, the beautiful view of downtown. We are joined by Thomas Mella, the president at Sightline Freight Partners. Thomas first started his journey in logistics at Menlo Logistics that was part of Conway, got acquired by XPO. Then he went on to Fort Kites, and now he is the owner of his own company that he bootstrapped. And so we're looking forward to talking to Thomas about his journey in logistics and what he's building right now. And I'm also joined by my co-host, Christian Gebbies, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of FreightCaviar and CRM. So, Thomas, thanks for stopping by today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited for the conversation.
Definitely. So just some, I guess, like backstory here. You went to the same high school as Reed. And so for everyone listening here, Reed Lucelot on LinkedIn, Twitter. You went to the same high school in Phoenix, Arizona. But you probably weren't like friends back then.
I did not know Reed, but I will say go Brophy Broncos for the alumni out there, but I did not know Reed at the time.
Okay. So like when you found out about Reed recently, I guess through like, the Twitter and all that social media stuff, like were you surprised? Like, oh, I went to high school with him?
I joined Tech Bro Tuesdays as much as I can, and I don't know how it came up, but then I actually got a chance to meet him in person in Phoenix, and yeah, it's cool to have the freight community coming out of the high school.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Very cool. Good stuff. So I guess now back to the beginning of your journey, Thomas, can you let us know, like, how did you get into the logistics industry and tell us about your experience?
Yeah. So going all the way back, I actually, in high school, we do a weekly summit about different topics. One summit was about sustainability. So when I went into college, I actually majored in sustainability. And then I took a class on supply chain management and added a double major in supply chain management. And the reason for that is practical use of reducing waste, reducing emissions is often in supply chain. And I wanted to get a job. And so I double majored in those two and then joined Menlo and really cut my teeth on running warehousing and transportation operations and just fell in love with the puzzles and the challenge and having a practical impact out there in the world.
Mm-hmm. What is Menlo? Can you tell us about that company? Like, I'm curious because they were part of Conway.
Yep.
I don't know much about them. I know they got acquired by XPO. That's about it.
Yeah.
Like, tell us why were they part of Conway and why did XPO want to acquire them?
Yeah, so Conway was, people will think about them as an LTL truckload company, and then they had a 3PL branch that did managed transportation, warehousing, value-added services. And so that was the part of the company that I joined in a rotational program where they hired me straight out of school, sent me to a warehouse in Columbus, Georgia, which is 90 minutes south of Atlanta. And that was like a boot camp in supply chain. Like I was managing a team of 25 warehouse reps as a 22-year-old.
Okay.
But the reason I joined was that rotational program was really attractive to me. Got to live in Canada for a year. And as someone who was just starting out in my career, having that type of responsibility, being able to go do different things was really important to me.
Okay. So Menlo was the managed transportation and warehousing arm of Conway.
Yeah.
And so they had tons of warehouses, it seems like. Now they're branded XPO, right? Or GXO? Like what is...
So now that would be GXO.
Now that'd be GXO. Okay. So interesting. And then you were able to travel around like the US and Canada, working at various warehouses. And tell us a little bit about that. I'm curious.
Yeah. So when I would be staffed on a warehousing account, right? So they would say, hey, we have a new customer. They want us to support their line side manufacturing. Can you come in and help us install a WMS and lead an inbound, outbound operations team? And so they'd say, hey, this young person can go out there and try to do this. And that was typically where I would get injected, is where it was a new account that they won to service a shipper, sometimes manufacturers, or one oil and gas account I did the transportation spin up for, or supported. And so, yeah, that was what we did is, you could, like an equivalent today would be like C.H. Robinson, TMC, what they do in managed transportation, some of their warehousing. That would be what they would sell and where I would support.
Okay, got it. And then they get acquired by XPO in what year?
That would have been probably 2015.
2015. So you were there for an XPO acquired them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did your like role change? Like how was that like getting acquired by XPO?
Yeah. No. Short answer is no. My role didn't change. I will say I was so low level, but I would say a lot of the executive sponsors that I looked up to recognized that a lot was changing. And so after a few of those folks left, I recognized it was time for me to probably stop moving around the country, settle down. I had a chance to do a rotation in Chicago, fell in love with Chicago. I was here in the summer, so I had a little bit rose-colored glasses. Yeah. And stumbled across FreightCaviar.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, Chicago is the best place to be during the summertime.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Really, it's hard to beat.
Yeah.
Sure.
Winter, different story. Yeah, winter's tough. But okay, so FreightCaviar, 2016, you were one of the first employees at FreightCaviar.
Yes.
Walk us through that.
Yeah. So I interviewed in a shared office space, kind of felt like this room, and I had a chance to meet Matt. I understood the problem they were trying to solve, having worked in transportation and calling and emailing carriers and drivers and trying to get updates on freight. And I would say one of the most memorable experiences from that interview was like, if you're in a room like this with people talking about technology, I was like, does this really work and exist? So I actually asked for a demo, which they said no one's ever asked for as part of the interview process. And yeah, I was really excited about it, excited to come to Chicago, really felt confident about the team. And then I joined right after their seed round, but before Series A. And so over the next 6 months, we raised, I think it was, I want to say $15 million. And before I knew it, I had a team of 12, 15 people doing integrations, carrier onboarding to build that network out. And I had a lot of responsibility quickly. And I thank FreightCaviar and Matt for trusting me with it.
I know it's 5 years, right, at FreightCaviar?
Yeah.
Okay, so you went
You probably worked with Chris Glotzbach then? as
Yeah,
well?
yeah.
He's a good friend of ours. He was here actually at the FreightCaviar Happy Hour too.
to do a podcast with them. So,
I've been working that way for a long time, but yeah, interesting story for sure.
yeah. So you went sort of at FreightCaviar, employee number 10, I think you said, right?
Yes.
Employee number 10. And then like you raised a ton of capital. You're there when they raised money. Like I don't know, like what was that like being in such a like high growth company, like startup?
Yeah. It is it's a lot of work, and it requires kind of both sides of your brain. So you have to be able to execute, be an individual contributor, understand a problem and solve it, whether that's explaining it to an engineer, actually doing the integration work, analyzing data. But then you also have to wear these kind of use this other skill set to say, like, what is the right way to build and solve this? And then have the confidence to go into the CEO's office and say, like, hey, we're doing this today. It's really inefficient. Here's how I think we can actually make it better, and pitch that. And then you're going to be able to own the solution and make it happen.
Okay. So
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on our podcast, we need your support. It will only take a moment, but it would mean the world to us. Please make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share with one of your friends that would enjoy our content. Your engagement helps us reach more people and bring more awesome episodes to you. Thanks a million, and thanks for being part of the podcast community.
curious, Thomas, you walk us through like where you are right now, the product that you started, the company you started, and like the takeaways you had from FreightCaviar, because I'm guessing the company came about because of your experience with FreightCaviar.
Yeah. So as I had a few different leadership roles in the operations side, one of my key responsibilities was go into a at-risk customers building, right? Get on a plane, go to their office, meet with them in a conference room. And my job was to make sure that they stayed on the software, right? So they bought it. Maybe the implementation wasn't going as well, or they weren't getting the value they expected. And success for me was making sure that they stayed and potentially grew in using the software. But I always felt like we were leaving a ton of ROI on the table. I remember meeting with customers and saying, if we could do these integrations for them, if we could sit with them and redefine their process, we could deliver $10 million, $20 million in savings in year one. And after having, and I think after having that feeling of like, that's not my job. I'm not there to be their consultant and help them deliver on all those things. I'm there to offer them software and make sure it works. But after having that feeling for a few years, I was like, if I truly believe that I could execute on this, then I should go and put my money where my mouth is. And that's how I started Sightline Freight Partners.
Okay. And these customers of FreightCaviar, were they predominantly shippers or brokerages, carriers? What were they?
Predominantly shippers. I did work with a lot of their 3PLs and freight brokers who were always the tricky ones, right? You go from a shipper with 100 carriers to a freight brokerage with 50,000 carriers. It's a different engagement. But I worked with both. And today, all of our customers are 3PLs and freight brokerages. And that was not by design, or I didn't do that intentionally. But I've really enjoyed learning this market and expanding beyond just real-time visibility.
Okay.
Seems like all freight tech starts with the brokers first, and then maybe venture out.
Yeah, brokers are, I guess, easiest to sell into. I believe most open to like tech. But I'm curious because you mentioned Thomas now that like you would go to these offices when you were at FreightCaviar, and you'd sit down with them, with mostly shippers, and there would be you saw that there would be potential for like for you to save them like $10 to $20 million a year. Like, why would like these implementations or strategies save them that much money? I'm just curious. Like I mean, this obviously has to be like $1 billion shipper, like a huge, massive shipper. But like, curious, like, what kind of changes would you have implemented that would have brought those cost savings?
Yeah, you bet. So, like, one of the easiest examples of that is shippers have the same challenge that a lot of freight brokerages do, which is they have to get an entry time at pickup, departure, those major milestones they have to get in their system. And FreightCaviar has that data often available to expose to their customers, but they will often have 20, 40 people staffed just doing those manual updates. And so
The shipper will have.
the shipper is similar to a broker.
Okay.
But you can imagine if you're shipping $10 billion worth of goods, how many people you have doing that across different modes. And one of the challenges was always, hey, FreightKites has this data. It will tell you when it got off, discharged at the port. Will tell you when it got loaded. It will give you the delivery messages. They always had a challenge of consuming that data into their system. And as a software provider, you're there to say, here's our APIs. You can use them. We will send you this data. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility and your team has to digest it. And they often would have such a big backlog on the technical side, the project management side, to understand how do we process it, how do I build that integration, that would, instead of being something that we could do in 2 or 3 months, we would be talking about it potentially 2 or 3 years later.
Okay.
So a total amount of resources basically to do that
Yeah.
yourself essentially was how that cost savings was justified.
Yep, you betcha. The other big one for them is like detention, right? They can have all this data about how long a truck is actually dwelling, and then they often don't review it, or I hope I don't get beat up for this one, but they will dispute it when they have the data to show that, hey, this truck arrived and departed in 90 minutes. I'm not going to pay for 5 hours of detention.
I feel like shippers dispute detention all the time. I feel like that's all they do. I don't know any shipper that doesn't dispute detention.
The thing that I would always encourage them to say is like, don't dispute it. Just say, here's the data I have. I show you, Ryan, here's the GPS things. Like, prove it to me that something else happened, but here's where your trucks were.
Sure. Okay. So you decided to like open up Sightline Freight Partners because you saw like some of the inefficiencies or some of the ways that you could provide ROI to customers, shippers, and then take us through that like whole idea phase of like, okay, I'm going to leave FreightKites now. I'm going to start off my own venture. And like, what was like the initial product that you were offering, service that you were offering, and how has that progressed? Because I think you were kind of surprised that like predominantly most of your customers are 3PLs and freight brokers, where you probably thought beforehand they're going to be shippers, right?
Yeah. So shippers weren't really interested in talking to a one-man shop when I was starting, so I called a lot of my contacts.
Yeah.
But for how I actually, before I left FreightKites, the first thing I did was I talked with folks like Matt, with our president, Sean Fallon. I talked with the executive team and was like, hey, here's my idea. Like, what do you think, right? These are people I've worked with for a long time and really respect and trust. And then they would connect me with other folks who had started similar businesses. And everyone's like, if you believe in it, it will be successful. I would say, so maybe 6 months after we started, the key thing that I did was I got more technical resources into the business. So I can help design integrations, I can do things, but I'm not a full stack engineer or an integration engineer. And so today we have 4 integration engineers who actually do the hard, heavy lifting part of these integrations. And so that's kind of been our big unlock, is we offer not only like, here's how you can get ROI, here's how we think it will work, and do the project management, almost like a product management approach. But then we also execute and do the integration. So from a customer's perspective, it's like, here's my problem, I want to solve it. What do you think? Help me design it. And then we just take it and run with it.
Okay. Got it.
So Sightline is doing integrations with which types of products and platforms?
Yeah.
There's a couple of examples, for example.
Yeah, so a big one that we do a lot of work with is green screens. We do some work with TextLocate. Love what they're doing. Also Parade. To get the full value out of some of those tools, they have to be integrated into your TMS. And that's, APIs are available. We'll spin those up and on kind of a middleware component to it.
Mm-hmm.
But we also do TMS to TMS integrations, ERP and general ledger integrations, which aren't necessarily my favorite.
Sure.
And then one thing I'm particularly proud of is we've actually stood up, done everything from looking at different TMSs for customers, recommending a TMS, and then implementing a TMS, which is the hardest project in logistics. And we've had a chance to do that a couple times. And then delivering it on time and in budget. Like the team we enjoy working with each other, but those are really hard projects and tests.
Mm-hmm. So the end product that gets used by broker 3PL, what does it look like? So you mentioned green screens, it's a pricing engine, right?
Sure.
Then you also got TextLocate, which is a visibility product. What does the end product actually look like for a broker?
Yeah. So if you're a broker and you say, hey, I have TMS X and I really want to improve my visibility, right? So we do a good amount of visibility work today. We'll look at what they're using today and say, hey, you're using Project 44 today. We know that drivers really love the MacroPoint app. We think you can get additional adoption with tracking from your drivers if you'll, in addition, implement and integrate MacroPoint. And we'll manage everything from the integration process, if there's work needed there, to onboarding carriers. If you have high volume carriers who are working with a particular visibility provider but want to use a different, it takes a little bit of elbow grease to reach out to them, tell them what they need to do. We'll own that whole process for them to make sure that here's the ROI statement and we deliver on that ROI.
EPay Manager, powered by OTR Solutions, is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. Learn more about ePay by visiting epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage.
Now, how does Sightline actually make money then? Like, is it a monthly service? Is it a per integration, spec'd out, like, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to integrate all of this for you. You guys pay us this much. How does it work?
Yeah, so typically our customers will say, hey, we'll scope out how long we think something is going to take. And we'll tell them, we'll give them an hourly rate effectively. And I try to stay away from a long document with a set scope of work. And the reason for that is if you're implementing a solution like Parade for capacity management, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I want to use this new functionality, I don't want to come back to them and say like, oh, that's a great ROI, I would love to do that. I'll update our scope of work and have, I don't want to make any more friction in the process. I want to be laser focused on delivering value for the customer. So typically it's time and materials.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Thomas, you did mention that like you've had customers come to you and you'd recommend TMSs. Like, do you look overall at their business and see what they're operating in, like before you recommend TMS, or do you like a TMS that you just recommend?
Yeah. So do not do referral agreements with anyone. I am biased. Everyone's biased. But I think each one has different strengths and weaknesses. So I think I'll use kind of my longest history. I think each of the visibility providers is better at different things. And there's really not a one solution where I'd say this is the best. I think it really depends on what you need. And the same thing goes for TMSs.
Okay.
Another thing I'm really proud of is we actually did a selection process for a customer. We came back to them and said, hey, you shouldn't get a new TMS.
Okay.
And so we talked ourselves out of work, and we were very comfortable and confident doing that, because if you do the right thing for the customer, you deliver them value, right, that's how we want to grow. This is probably like our biggest marketing effort I've ever done. Thank you again.
Nice. Yeah, no worries. You reached out to me via email, Thomas, and I just saw your website. I'm like, looks pretty interesting. Would want to learn more. And then we just interviewed Danny Frisco like an hour ago, and he was telling me that you were hanging out a month ago in Guadalajara. I'm like, oh wow, okay. Like, and then small world. Yeah, I think Paul Singer also knows who you are, and we interviewed him. That was the first episode today.
Yeah.
So yes, small world, it's a small great world. But okay, so I'm kind of curious, like, could you actually disclose the names of the TMSs that you recommend, like, depending on which client you're working with? Because I'm kind of curious, like, like, what are different variables that you look at that would make you want to recommend X TMS versus this TMS? And, like, how do you go about that? And same when it comes to, like, even tracking providers. There's so many of them. You know the strengths and weaknesses. It seems like you know all of them. Can you kind of talk about that, discuss in more detail how that looks like?
Yeah. So I think a few things. One is, how much, what's your budget? That's
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And depending on your budget, it kind of will put you into different categories.
Okay.
One end of the spectrum is mastery, right?
Yeah.
That is
Most expensive, right?
But yes, the best. It is.
And it's the best. It's the most expensive and the best.
It will do pretty much anything that you want it to do. At this point, yeah, it is.
Really?
Yeah.
You've been able to like tinker with it a little bit, or?
I have some friends there and talk with them about it. And over the past 18 months, you can see that they're just chunking off all of these different things because of the companies they're in, right? Their companies want them to do LTL, want them to do standard truck brokerage, want them to do intermodal.
And they have a lot of capital and people behind it, so they're working really fast.
Yeah. And so that's one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum, I would say, is like Ascend and folks like that. And then somewhere kind of closer to Ascend would be folks like Turbo, Rose Rocket, and then a little bit further on is someone like Revanova. So I'll pick up Revanova really quick. Revanova is really good if you're doing configuration things. If you have specialized freight, you need to be able to quickly configure and set it up. It is effectively a CRM, and so being able to adapt and do those things is makes it really powerful. But there's all sorts of strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, we just interviewed the CEO of Revanova a week ago.
That was an interesting one.
Charles, yeah. And then it's funny because Charles from Revanova and Jeff Silver from Mastery are both from like the same town north of Chicago. So you could, I'm not sure how your relationships are with them, but you could, if you wanted to, probably catch them around here somewhere. But okay, so now that's the TMS. What about when it comes to like tracking providers, P44, FreightKites, TextLocate, Trucker Tools, all that kind of stuff? Like, do you also consult on that? Like in the sense, like you look at a broker and you're like, do you need all of these, or do you need just maybe a couple of these, or just one of these? Like, how does that like look?
Yeah, it's so even in the TMS space, I should preface everything with like, it changes quickly, right? These people are innovating, maybe not at the pace they were when they were raising hundreds of millions of dollars, but they're still innovating really quickly and trying to compete in new places. I would say I'll pick on a really easy one, which is MacroPoint. So MacroPoint's adoption within the driver market. So individual owner operators all have MacroPoint installed. They all trust it. You know, whether that trust or usability is, it's kind of irrelevant. They already have it and they already are comfortable using it. And then I'll say for FreightKites, something they do really well is primarily for large shippers is connecting all of the different modes that a particular order may move in as it's imported, exported.
Yeah.
That is one of their strengths. And then I'll also give Project 44 a shout out. Their LTL product remains one of the strongest in the space for dispatch, rating, tracking, and imaging and billing.
Okay. So that was interesting to hear. Like you said, that FreightKites is great for like all modes of transportation, and P44 is somewhat similar. You worked at FreightKites for a while, and we know there's a lot of, I don't know, I guess, tension between the two companies, 44 and FreightKites. There's lawsuits, etc. How was it like working at FreightKites with that ongoing situation? Because both companies are headquartered in Chicago. Can you tell us a little bit about that beef and the tensions that arose, as much as you can, or as much as you're comfortable?
Yes,
like discussing.
I like the people I know at Project 44. We implement their solution for visibility across different modes, and I think that they generally do a good job. My take on it is if I wish they were more focused on their customers and their product.
You wish FreightKites was more focused?
Both Project 44 and FreightKites.
Okay.
I think that, and this is kind of a broad statement across things, but like at a certain point, paying attention to the competition is not it doesn't bring you forward, doesn't benefit your customers, doesn't help you win more. And so, and I think the lawsuit is for like $60,000 or one of them. I just don't necessarily think that they're, my advice to both of them is to focus and spend more time on their customers.
Okay. Wow. FreightKites might be listening to this and be like, we're not helping you out anymore, Thomas. This is the worst marketing material you've ever done. Only one and the worst one.
No, I really...
We could cut it out.
Yeah. I really do recommend all those solutions. They really do have different strengths and weaknesses. And
they're agnostic to all.
Yeah, totally. And like, I have my bias, right? Like, I have great friends at FreightKites, and acquaintances and things in Project 44, but I had a FreightKites table at my wedding. Like, I think the important part about what we do is like, we have bias, let's acknowledge them. And so yeah, I have a lot of good friends there.
Definitely. Can you tell us a little bit about your trip to like Guadalajara? Because like we just interviewed Danny Frisco. So the episode right before this one, if you go a week late before this, was one of Danny Frisco. And we were talking to Danny after the podcast, and he was telling us that I was telling him that we're interviewing you, Thomas. And he said, "Oh, we just hung out a month ago in Guadalajara." So like, you went to go to Guadalajara to train someone from Rapido on how to use it, the system that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, do you travel a lot, like to like do training and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I'll take the latter half first. We love being in person. That's, I have no plans to move out of Chicago. Most of our customers are based here. We try to spend at least a day or two a week in our customers' offices. And it's like, there's nothing more powerful than sitting with a user and they're like, hey, I'm using API rating and I'm getting these rates, like what's going on, and like seeing that on their screen and talking them through how it works and how to update rules and things. I just think that in-person interface with folks is so important. So yes, we spent a lot of time in person. The trip to Guadalajara originated 18 months ago, where we had a customer that we implemented Project 44 and MacroPoint 4. And they're like, hey, I'm at 80-90% tracking. I'm on the FreightKites Premier Carrier list, which is one of their objectives. And I want to, now what do I do with this 20%? So I have a nearshore team. I'm tracking 80% of my freight, but I need to be able to say who's responsible for tracking a particular load, make sure I'm tracking 100% of my freight, identify a freight that's running late or in detention or needs a location update. I need a place where I can see the performance of that team and know exactly what the status of our tracking team is. And so we built a product. It's called TrackFlo. And that product is built for nearshore teams primarily so that it runs on a schedule. It assigns a tracking rep to an individual load. There's no question. There's no statement like, oh, Mexico's tracking this. It's Jessica is tracking this load or Thomas is tracking this load. And there's a clear articulation on the number of loads that are don't have a location update, are past the delivery time, are running late, are in detention. And it's up to them to say, it's almost gamified. So there's 10 different numbers and they're able to click on the number and say, okay, this is at risk for being in detention. I called the driver. They actually left. I updated all within that system, and they don't need access to a TMS. There's really no reason that a tracking rep should have access to your TMS, and instead they should have a purpose-built tool, and that's what TrackFlo is.
Okay. Wow. Today's podcast is also brought to you by TextLocate. TextLocate makes it easy for brokers to communicate directly with drivers via SMS-based text messaging, no app to download without having to use personal communication devices. Go to textlocate.com to learn more. That's cool. And you built that specifically because your customer needed it, right?
Yeah, so we went to market to find them a solution, and beyond modifying their TMS, there was not a solution for them. We did not set out to start a software company. And they said, hey, like, none of these solutions are good. Will you build us something and we'll license it from you? And my reaction was like, it's not really what we do, but we'll try it. And 18 months later, we've got customers on it using it. Rapido team has 10 or 15 people using it every day. Excited to see that thing take off.
I feel like it's not even only like nearshoring or outsourcing teams that could use it. It's like anyone that's a tracker, right?
Anybody.
Well, I guess nowadays, like, most trackers are outsourced. But like overall, like anyone. So you just go in and it's integrated with the TMS. So like you just click a few buttons and it gets updated. It's really cool. So I guess it also like increases the maybe trust, or maybe not trust, but like it allows for people that are outsourcing, to other countries, using other companies to like know like, okay, like none of my data is out there. Just we have their tracking team and they're just updating it using TrackFlo.
You got it. Yep.
Right. Okay.
And it's very clear about here's the activity you need to perform.
Sure.
And it's very clear about how many activities need to be performed by an individual.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I don't want to leave out is we've layered in more automation to it as well. So it's the human element's really important, but having an automation to say, send a text to a driver where they can click a link, text locate functionality, provide location, have a way to manage all of that so they can set it up on rules or collecting PODs.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing we're planning to launch here in the next few days is through a partnership with Load Partner, they click a button or it will run out a rule if there's not an update in a certain amount of time. Click a button, calls the driver. So I'm excited to hear more.
Yeah, shout out Garrett. I was going to say, like, so you're working with a Garrett Mode partner?
Yeah, you got,
Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, cool. How does that, let's talk maybe a little bit about that. How does that look like from an automation perspective? You click a button and it calls the driver. What is it? It's checking with the driver. How does that work?
yeah. So there's functions that you put into the call, the API call. It'll say get an ETA, get a location, and then Garrett initiates that phone call. That's what his team is really excellent at, right? Is how do you make the AI make happen? I don't
Sure.
want to be
Magic. Yeah.
Yep, sure. Yeah. And
Black magic.
and then it'll call the driver, and the driver will make statements like, I'm in Chicago, my ETA is 1200, and then they'll standardize that data, populate it back in our system, which will feed back into the point of truth, which is the TMS.
Okay. So TrackFlo you're just integrating with a lot of partners, right? Are you also creating like your own tracking kind of tool inside of it, or you just want to integrate as many partners as possible?
Yeah, so our value statement is really three places. What loads do I need to track? So how do I get those to 100%? How do I manage my tracking team and know what their performance is and automate as much of that as possible? And then there's also a customer portal where we have a lot of shipper customers who log in to view their tracking information. That was just really easy to build once you know the rest of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's our objective there. I do not want to compete in the network game that Project 44, FreightCaviar, MacroPoint have. Like, that is hats off to them for making that network and trucker tools as well.
Yeah.
want to partner with as many folks as possible and stay focused on a workflow.
I love that because like you're creating something different in the industry, right? There's like so many tracking visibility tools, but you're like putting them all together, and making one really powerful tool.
So is it how many TMS integrations do you guys have right now?
Yeah, so we've integrated with maybe a half dozen different TMSs on the consulting side. Today, we only have 2 TMS integrations or 2 distinct TMSs that we've integrated in for TrackFlo.
Okay.
But it's if the APIs are available, it's pretty straightforward to set up at this point.
Do you guys have plans to integrate with any TMS APIs that maybe you don't have a customer for right now, and just kind of provide coverage so that you can go out after more customers?
Yeah.
Or is it in the order of like, let's go and find a customer first, and if we don't have that integration, we'll figure that out?
Definitely the latter. And the thing I would say is that if I think very highly of our system integrations team and engineers, if they can't figure it out in 9 to 12 weeks, something has gone really wrong. And so I feel confident that with the next TMS they have to work with, that's what they do, and they'll execute.
I'm just gonna pause for a second here. The doors keep opening, and I'm not sure to be cleaning here. Sorry about this, Thomas. We almost got kicked out here today, and we're like, no, like, Christian saved the day. But I guess we just.
How do you think I'm doing?
Really good, really good. I got a few bangers here coming at you. Hang on.
Boy, okay.
I think
Derek, I think this can get fixed, right?
a little bit. I'm gonna actually fix my pants room.
Yeah?
They're like way too.
Yeah, Paul, I think this.
Yeah, we'll get a good
filter.
All right, so we're good. All right. So Thomas, you set out essentially to build a consulting company, right? Like that was like the idea, and then you also created software because there was a need from your customer. And now, like, do you look at it as both being a consulting company and a software company, or do you predominantly now view it as one or the other? Like, what is that like to you, and where do you see it going, like, towards?
Yeah, so my statement to customers of either system is that if there is a better solution out there for track and trace in managing your nearshore team, we will recommend that solution, right? That doesn't really exist today in the market, which is why we were comfortable building it and why our customer asked us to build it. They are 2 distinct companies. The TrackFlo product is actually under a company called Track and Trace Technologies. So we're not very good at branding, but that's where that one exists.
I mean, that's a perfect name. People tend to overcomplicate names, you know? It's like, what do you do? Track and Trace Technologies. Nice and easy. Yeah. Okay, so 2 separate companies, and where do you spend most of your time on? Like, what are you focused on? Is it split half and half? Like, what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, I would say it's about 80 or 90% on the consulting side. And the software side, we're just starting to go to market with it.
Okay.
So we feel very confident that we've delivered for the customers that are using it. They've kind of found all the bugs and built a product that we feel like is ready to scale. And so I'm hoping that gets, I spend more time on the product side and the software side. But today we have so many customers on the consulting side that need help with designs or vendor selection, project management, and integration work. That is certainly, I have no problem staying busy there.
Okay. So most of your customers, you said, are 3PLs and freight brokers. So what does like a typical customer like call you about? Like, let's say ABC brokerage. It's like, okay, like, I don't know. I just want to talk to Thomas. I don't want to know like how he can help me, because I don't even know how he can help me. How, like, someone calls you up, Bob calls you up.
Yep.
What does that look like? What are you typically like discussing? What are the problems that you see at brokerages that are typical, and like, how does that conversation look like with the brokerage?
Yeah. So I would say one of the places we're getting the most questions and asks is around API quoting.
API quoting.
Yep.
It's like making sure that you could like easily get rates maybe from green screens if that's your tool, and quickly send out like a rate back to the customer, right? Or
You nailed it. Yep.
Okay.
So you think about tools like AVRL or Tabby, like those folks have great products. But in order for those to work effectively, you have to make sure you feed in the right data. And often there's not an ROI on those products because they are fairly expensive. And so it's, how do I know if I have a real opportunity to integrate? And then we do the integrations for real-time rating where the customer owns the build, right? We'll build the integration for you. It'll be fed rate data, whether that's from DAT rate view, green screens, anywhere else. You own that integration back to the TMS, the shipper TMS. You get to design the rules for it. You can make it do anything you want. And then once it's done, it's yours. You don't have to pay a recurring fee to a software provider.
Okay. So like, and this is your focus on APIs. Like, do you do like EDI stuff integration? Like, I'm not very technical here.
Yeah.
I know like EDI is like the old school, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a lot more work involved in the EDI integration. Like, and I was at the Freighter Golf event last week. Is that like a competitor to yours? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, we don't like run like a van or like a value add network. Like we're not hosting typically EDI services for folks. People will call us and say like, hey, we're having EDI issues, and we'll open up the EDI and look at it and talk. And a big part of what we do is like we communicate with both parties. And so we'll call the shipper and say like, hey, here's what we're sending you. Why isn't this processing? Your specs updated. And we will do a little bit of template updates on the EDI side. But I would say maybe 10% of our work is EDI related. And I think Bitfreighter does a great job of just taking it and outsourcing the whole thing. We would do more of like, hey, I have a system. How do I update my configuration to make it work?
Yeah.
Ameripol offers a solution that helps reduce staffing costs by over 50% without sacrificing quality. Visit transport.ameripolstaffing.com to discover how Ameripol can help your business operate more efficiently.
So most brokers offer maybe see brokerage calls, and typically they're going to be asking you for API for rate engine, right?
Yeah, and I would say that's a common topic. Another one is Highway. Hey, I'm interested in using Highway.
Oh.
I need to integrate it with my TMS. Another big one is I want a capacity solution. How do I make sure I have a book it now rate, a max pay? How do I use all this market data for rates and drive value, whether that's to buy better with carriers or provide a better quote to my customers? And then we also just do a ton of automation or integrations in between systems. So folks will say, hey, I have, I'm using green screens today, but it's not feeding into my TMS. Like, how do I make sure I'm giving them the right data in an automated way so they can generate the right rates? And then I can get the data out and use it in my TMS or provide those quotes to customers or better book down rates for carriers.
Nice.
Interesting. You have any technical questions, Christian?
No, not necessarily. I'm just interested in like what maybe might evolve out of this, all this integration work that you're doing. Is like right now it's very, it's heavy on the consulting side too, right? But like one thing I haven't seen really is a good TMS aggregation type, service. And I don't think it's as
TMS aggregation?
TMS aggregation. So
Aggregation.
Yeah, it's just like you go to one platform and they have a standard set of like a standard defined way of like communicating with TMSs.
Okay.
And it's harder done than set for sure, because every TMS is like ever so slightly different in how it works, what it can do and stuff like this, right? But that's one thing I've been kind of like out on the lookout for, is what just in general, because I feel like that's something that the industry could really benefit from. One standardized interface that takes care of like every TMS integration, and that way everybody just uses that one integration, and that one company basically handles like, okay, we're gonna make sure that all this data, we'll get the data to the right TMS, basically, right? Is there any plans for that? How does that look?
Yeah, I've talked with a lot of folks who were interested in building that, and I pointed to a company like Chain.io, who's doing that primarily on the freight forwarding side with tools.
We met him at TIA.
Yeah, and he's been at it for.
Or YC, I think.
They might be.
Here we are.
They might be.
Yeah, okay.
I hope I'm not thinking of the wrong folks.
Chainee, right?
CHAINE.com or
I think different company.
different company? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I hope I got the name right. The company I'm thinking of is primarily for freight forwarders, and they do that. And the reason they can do it in that space is because there's not that many freight forwarding softwares out there. But yeah, I would love to see it. I don't have any, plans to build that. I just think it would be really, really hard. One thing that I think was my view as a fail, and I'm curious to hear your view on this one, is the appointment scheduling consortium. Have you guys?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, funny story. When Paul and I first met, there was a piece of software that I was working on.
ZipDocs.
Yeah, and at the time it was automating appointment scheduling with like a Calendly link. The reason it didn't we didn't end up pursuing because I showed it to Paul, and Paul was like, this is sick and all this stuff. It was actually making phone calls before ChatGPT, all this came up. So it was pretty cool. But anyway, the appointment scheduling thing,
You should add that into Shipper CRM.
what I ended up kind of concluding on is that the appointment scheduling ended up being more of a internal a problem that actually pertained to whether or not somebody's going to show up for work inside the warehouse. Because if you could adjust the appointment, you have all the visibility integrations, you knew exactly what the ETA of the truck was, but then literally just the staff inside the warehouse didn't show up, or one of the people, right? Everything essentially gets thrown off.
Okay.
And it kind of like you still might be able to help a little bit on some detention time, but in general, it started to become clear to me that it was like more than just let's aggregate all the visibility, adjust ETAs, do calling, texting to the drivers, stuff like this, and also sales cycles to shippers are really long too, right? So that was I think within 2 weeks we ended up scratching 8 months of work, and I was like, all right, whatever, and then
Yeah, we got the idea to do Shipper CRM, and then we built on top of that. And to go back to the appointment scheduling consortium, what are your thoughts on that? Does that still exist?
So their website is up, and they have a document, and I've read through I think it's like 48 pages.
You read it?
really long.
I
Skimmed it.
Yeah, I would say I read parts of it.
Okay.
And skimmed all of it, but what I was expecting to see was a set of API documentation, and like it's not there. It's like a process of how to do appointments, and I was hoping that they would do exactly what you mentioned, which is like here's the standard set of APIs for appointments, manages everything, like just code to this, and then it'll connect to the TMS. And that's something everyone has to do, and in my view, they missed the mark there. And
then Convoy shut down, and they were like a big part of it, weren't they?
I'm sure they were paying money for the consortium. I'm not sure how it's.
I think that it's not. I mean, it's really just a spec, which is it's better than nothing for sure. But JB Hunt's a part of it.
Yeah.
Uber
Freight's a big part of it. Schneider and a couple of others. And I thought it would. I was hoping that it would be more than than just a spec. I don't actually know how much in practice it's actually being used. Because it's a lot of the shippers, they have their own individual interfaces. Some use OpenDoc, for example, right? That's a big one. I think FourKites has
their own, right?
FourKites has their own as well. So I think it's a harder. You got to start somewhere. So, applause for the consortium from that perspective. But yeah, there's not much code. I don't even think there is code really. It's just a standard spec. And I think that I did see somewhere in the documentation that there were some like defined kind of like endpoints, and like how those endpoints what type of data you'd want to pass to those endpoints, what type of data you'd get back from those endpoints. So I think it's going in that direction. I just don't know. Like, it doesn't seem too active. I don't check on it like super often, but
I don't think anyone's doing anything. They just made a big like press release, and then like no one's like really doing it. We haven't heard about it in like 2 years. They talked about it 2 years ago, like the appointment scheduling consortium. Freightways posted about it. We talked about it, and then like silence. And Convoy then closed down, and just like I don't know. I feel like no one's doing anything about it.
Yeah, there was some talk about it in the Lost Freight Discord, maybe 3-4 months ago. I tried reaching out to the lead guy. He's a software engineer at JB Hunt.
Sure.
I don't know, never responded. I don't know if he's not active on checking his email or LinkedIn or whatever, but I wanted to get him on the podcast to interview him about how that's going. And so if anybody's listening to this and somebody at this scheduling consortium, please let them know that we are very interested in interviewing somebody there that's working on it, and bringing more awareness to the industry. It seems like that's a spec that's more of a enterprise level adoption. I don't know to what extent smaller TMSs would integrate, because it's a fairly large spec, to be honest. So it is a lot of work, and every shipper having their own interface, like it's not even like they could adopt that spec unless every shipper basically adopted and integrated that scheduling spec to begin with. So it's a bigger effort and going to take a longer and much larger effort, I think, for people to move to that spec, but we'll see. So
Yeah, and maybe I need to go back and read it. I think what I was expecting was like Swagger documentation. Like something that an engineer could pick up and code to.
Yep.
And maybe there's
there might be now, but I haven't checked in a while either.
Yeah.
So
sounds like we had a similar reaction, but I probably need to reread it.
yeah. So scheduling is a difficult challenge. I know Chris Glotzbach's pretty. I mean, that's kind of like I started working on ZipDocs actually with him and another guy, Chris Hines, and at the time, and they were trying to do automated appointment scheduling back at like American Backhaulers, like for a long time, and it
30 years ago.
a long time. Maybe it was like right at the end of American Backhaulers, or basically maybe right after. Yeah, I got acquired by CH and Co. But that just always seemed to be a bottleneck, and it's just so fragmented that it's really difficult to kind of divide and conquer that one. So, but anyway, decided to take on a noble effort. Didn't know how to program web apps, and that was my project to like learn web apps with. So,
In terms of tracking providers, so like there's been so many tracking providers come into existence over the last decade. Like, where do you see like the direction of that headed? Like, there's a lot of players in the game. All the pros and cons of all of them. What do you think is going to happen over the next decade when it comes to tracking? Can you have any idea? I'm guessing you think about it quite often. Yeah. It's like, where is your mind at when it comes to that? Levity.ai. In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Visit Levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Yeah, the network side of it is... So like I was talking with somebody who wanted to build a new tracking solution, like you've got Axle now, DrumKit, right?
Yeah.
Like doing these ELD integrations. That's the easy part. The hard part is convincing 100,000, 250,000 trucking companies to share their ELD credentials, or if they're not willing to share their ELD credentials, integrate and send the data. And so it's like those are, Forkites and Project 44 and MacroPoint have spent combined hundreds of billions of dollars building those networks. I don't necessarily advise anyone try to compete with that. Now, I will say that there are unique ways to get in there. So Highway in particular, as a part of their onboarding process, they do ELD verification.
Right.
And they've got the carrier, when the carrier has an incentive to share their ELD credentials, and they're collecting a lot of ELD information and exposing it. So I think my bold prediction for the next 3 years is if anyone is going to come into that market with a fresh take, it would be Highway if they decide that that's something they're interested in doing.
Okay. In the sense of being like a tracking provider, like because there's integrated the ELDs. So like in a way, like if Highway does get all those like trucking companies onboarded, and it seems like they're headed that direction, are you saying like a lot of like the over the road kind of US tracking providers like won't be necessary?
Potentially, right? So if carriers, as the owner operators, will go into Highway and sign the contract in Highway, right? And if as a part of that process, it's a requirement for them to share their ELD information, you might have some of those legacy providers like MacroPoint get displaced. All of a sudden, you had a single truck owner operator give their ELD credentials to Highway. Why do you need MacroPoint to track?
You see it all the time anyway. You see it in real time. Wow. So you believe that's where we're headed?
I don't know if Highway will figure that out or find a better mousetrap for these folks to share ELD credentials, which is kind of the golden opportunity for tracking, right? That is getting those ELD credentials and knowing the truck number. I don't know if they necessarily will solve it. The only other way I could see it getting solved is some sort of national database for everyone sharing their locations all the time.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it is a really hard problem to solve to get a trucking company to be willing to share their ELD credentials.
Sure. Christian, I feel like you might have a lot of questions here.
I mean, that's it is hard for sure. It's Highway's doing Highway has a good incentive or requirement, I guess you can say, right? Like, yeah, let's call it a more.
I mean, it's insensitive. So I mean, it's requirement, but it's
They're reluctant. They're still reluctant to share it, right? But I think you had a earlier point. It's just like kind of there should be, if you were to be successful, if there's a new take on it, there should be an incentive basically for carriers to want to do that themselves, and
they want to have freight, and they're working with a broker instead of highway,
for example.
They need to share.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's a interesting thing. I mean, there was actually, just on the topic of visibility, there was a very new company that I recently heard of. I'm blanking on their name right now, but they raised $4 million. I think they're here, based in Chicago.
Gnosis?
Sorry?
Gnosis? No.
I don't know if, no, it's not Gnosis. They came out, they have a proprietary GPS independent tracking system that just using the phone that you have is able to get better position accuracy than satellite-based positioning. So even if you don't have a direct connection to it's completely independent of GPS, but it's able to get you centimeter level accuracy. I have no clue.
Just from your phone number?
No, just from your phone, the sensors on your phone. And they're not even using camera or anything. I think it's just like the accelerometer, the compass, and stuff like this, like based on magnetic fields, would be my guess. But the founders, I tried getting the founder, but he just had a kid. So he has his hands tied with that. But I know they just raised like $4 million, blanking on the name of it. But that is the one thing that I've had in my, back of my mind, which is supposedly they're backed by the Department of Defense or something like this. So it's like some pretty serious tech. They're not really that well known in freight space yet, but I think like we'll probably hear more of them within the next year or two.
Yeah. One that I don't want to forget about too in the visibility space is the guy's name is Ryan. He's installing cameras along major freeways.
Ryan Joyce?
Thank you.
Genlogs.
Yes, Genlogs. Yes, they definitely could crack that nut as well in a unique way. I really impressed with what he's built. I think he's still fine-tuning his product market fit, but that infrastructure and that network, he came about it in a different way. So it'll be interesting to see if that
Definitely
pans out for visibility.
So there is a world here, like a decade from now, where we might see fewer providers of tracking, potentially, if like some companies go about it the right way, because like it's very, very fragmented right now. And if you were to like think about it now, would you say in 10 years there'll be less tracking providers and just a few that are really, let's say, capable of just providing you with information right away? Like, is that how you foresee it? Like,
yeah, I mean, there's not that many prevalent providers today. There's really only 4 or 5 who are out there working with 3PLs and freight brokers. I think there is room for consolidation, or more likely someone coming up with that better incentive and mousetrap and then running away with it, at least for the over-the-road side. One thing I'll kind of throw back to 2016, if you remember MacroPoint and FourKites and all the tracking providers used cell phone triangulation, right? So like they actually were able to just ping your cell phone without you even knowing it. And then it turns out the provider for that technology was offering it to bail bondsmen without the approval of the person with the phone. It was on the front story in the Wall Street Journal, and that whole thing shut down. So who knows if something like that would come to market and change the game and be an underlying technology that the existing providers will use.
got it.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, like, let's just say that all this does happen, a couple of providers kind of take over the market share. How do you foresee your business changing and like coexisting in that environment?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, our customers, even if they have the most technical integration folks and project management folks, they have not implemented some of these new solutions before, and there will always be new solutions. And so working with someone like Sightline, who's worked with that software before, can help your time to value, making sure that you're not getting 50% of the value of that provider, but as close to 100% as possible. That value statement in what we do will always exist. And that's why we work in so many different parts and life cycles of a brokerage, because there's so much opportunity and technology to integrate and implement that 20% of our work today is in visibility. And if there is a new provider that takes storm, I'm hoping we can help implement them for folks.
So you're constantly just reading and learning about the, like, whatever's going on in the freight tech world, I'm guessing, just to kind of understand.
Yes.
So like you could provide the answers to your customers and be that kind of like, educated resource, knowledgeable person. Awesome.
I do want to emphasize something. It's like, I really enjoy the conversations and learning and getting demos. The hard part is going and integrating and implementing it, right? That's the blood, sweat, and tears that really teaches you how the software works. And that's why we don't have dozens of customers. We have a handful of customers who they rely on us to deploy this technology and support it and hone it, and we're an extension of their team. So I don't come in and like have a big sales pitch about who you should use. We go deep and we own it from start to finish, and we're accountable to the ROI of that project.
Nice. Awesome. Thomas, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate you having me. Making me think about cell phone triangulation was a throwback, so thank you again for having me.
Nothing. Thanks for stopping by. I really enjoyed this podcast.
That's great.
If anyone wants to learn more about you, Thomas, or your company, what should they do?
Yeah, email me at thomas@sightlinefreight.com. That's a mouthful. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Thomas Mella. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks so much, Thomas.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Daily FreightCaviar Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more FreightCaviar content, go to freightcaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.